The History Channel's show Swamp People died in a crash yesterday in Iberville Parish. The news that Randy Edwards died was confirmed overnight by other stars of the show.
They wrestle gators, move through dark water, and live a life most people wouldn't dare try. On Swamp People, they look fearless, like nothing can touch them. But what happens when the hunt ends and the cameras stop rolling? Some of these familiar faces didn't just disappear. Their stories took a turn no one expected. One moment in particular changed everything in seconds, and it didn't even happen in the swamp. So what really happened to them? Let's take a closer look at the Swamp People cast members who are now gone, or ended up behind bars. Mitchell Gwist. Mitchell Gwist became a fan favorite the moment he appeared on Swamp People. He wasn't trying to be famous or play a role. What you saw was exactly who he was. Living deep in the Louisiana swamps with his brother Glenn, Mitchell showed a kind of life that felt untouched by modern habits. The two brothers hunted, fished, and lived off the land the same way they had for years. They never married and stayed in the same home they grew up in, which made their bond even stronger. Their way of living stood out because it felt honest, simple, and real. And that's what drew people in. On the show, Mitchell wasn't limited to just alligator hunting. He did everything the swamp offered. From catching fish and frogs to trapping turtles and small game, he handled it all with ease. He moved through the water like it was second nature, calm and focused, no matter the task. There was no rush in how he worked, just steady effort and quiet confidence. Viewers didn't just watch him for action. They watched him because he represented a life that most people would never experience. His connection to the swamp wasn't something he learned from TV. It was something he lived every single day. The event occurred in May 2012, when his existence ceased to exist. Mitchell was operating his boat on the Bell River when he prepared for his regular daily activities. He was performing his task when he experienced a sudden health crisis. His brother Glenn, together with a nearby worker, executed an emergency operation which brought the boat back to land while they called for assistance. Emergency personnel performed CPR in an attempt to revive him before they transported him to the hospital. The situation had already reached a critical point. They declared Mitchell dead after he reached the hospital. He had almost completed his 48th birthday when he died. The people on the boat encountered an unexpected situation, which started as a regular experience. The show experienced a permanent loss because of his death, which affected all its viewers. The character's death did not create an emotional impact. The experience felt like the loss of a real person. The network later honored him with a tribute that displayed his influence on viewers and everyone who knew him. Glenn experienced the death of his friend because they shared a lifelong relationship, which ended with his death. The two men had lived their lives together until death ended their lifelong companionship. Mitchell's narrative developed into the most powerful segment within the series, which proved that actual people lived behind the show. People need to realize that their existence can end at any moment. That was just the beginning, because the next story doesn't go the way you'd expect at all. Joe Trapper Joe LaFont. Joe Trapper Joe LaFont was one of the more recognizable figures during the early seasons of Swamp People. He had a strong personality that stood out right away. On screen, he worked closely with his stepson, Tommy Chauvin, and the two built a partnership that felt natural and effective. Joe brought experience and a steady hand, while Tommy added speed and drive. Together, they handled hunts with confidence, often working through difficult conditions without hesitation. Viewers saw them as a reliable team, one that understood the swamp and knew how to get results without making things complicated. Joe's background enhanced his image. His previous experience with similar tasks showed through his movement patterns and his stress management capabilities. He kept his work process straightforward while he concentrated on his responsibilities without spending time on attempts to gain others' approval. His behavior delivered a watching experience that people could easily understand. He seemed like a person who had worked in this profession since before people invented filmmaking. The public perception of him began to change when events outside the water started to take place. His initial strong presence on the show evolved into a serious condition that became impossible to overlook. Joe encountered various legal problems throughout his life, which included domestic violence accusations as a primary reason for his troubles. A woman accused a man of attacking her during an argument, which resulted in multiple serious injuries, including broken ribs. The authorities launched an investigation into the situation, which led to subsequent criminal charges. The event represented a continuation of his previous behavior patterns. Arrests had occurred before because of similar actions, which included a separate incident where witnesses reported seeing aggressive behavior during a fight. The public became more interested in the situation because each occurrence revealed additional details about his activities, which took place beyond the camera's view. The problems that occurred during the show had significant consequences that reached beyond his time of appearance. The problems persisted until his part in Swamp People finished. The audience could not see the exact time he vanished from the show because he stopped appearing over a gradual period. The viewers who had watched Tommy and him together as partners saw the difference between the two men. His story became one of the more difficult ones tied to the series. The story shifted from the swamp and the hunting activities. The story showed how his decisions and his habitual behavior led him to lose his previous chance. The popular show started with his regular role, but later showed him that off-screen events determine all future developments. Payne. Nicholas Payne was one of the younger faces connected to Swamp People, known for working alongside veteran hunter Bruce Mitchell. At first, he looked like someone who could grow into the role. He was hands-on, willing to learn, and not afraid of the rough conditions that came with life in the swamp. Being around experienced hunters gave him a chance that many people never get. Viewers saw glimpses of potential, someone who could carry on the same kind of work that made the show popular. But while things looked steady on the surface, there were already signs that his path off-camera was not as stable. Behind the scenes, trouble had already started building. Before his name became widely known, Nicholas had been involved in earlier legal issues, including charges related to simple battery and resisting an officer. He had been given probation, which should have been a chance to reset and move forward. Not long after that, he was arrested again in another state for possession of paraphernalia. Missing a required court appearance only made things worse, leading to an active warrant. These were not isolated mistakes. They showed a pattern that kept pulling him deeper into problems that were getting harder to control. The situation reached its peak point during September 2011. The deputies responded to the residents because they received disturbance reports after midnight. The officers found themselves entering an already dangerous circumstance. Nicholas created a disturbance because he had been locked out of his location. The initial response to the call quickly transformed into a larger police situation. The officers experienced a physical confrontation after they returned to the location following another complaint. He allegedly hit a deputy before attempting to flee into the forest to escape his arrest. Authorities conducted a search operation and ultimately apprehended him. The subsequent charges resulted in severe consequences, which included felony battery of a police officer, resisting arrest, and disturbing the peace. After that incident, his connection to the show ended quietly. The character Michael left the show through two separate actions. which had no dramatic impact, yet showed him to be a different person without potential. For viewers, it raised questions about what had been happening behind the scenes long before the arrest became public. His story stands as one of the more troubling paths tied to the show. The problem extended beyond a single bad event because it developed through multiple choices that accumulated over time. The initial chance to join a greater mission developed into a sequence of lost opportunities that produced increasing outcomes that modified his life path. Bill Booth. Bill Booth became known to viewers through the expanded world of swamp people, especially for his work hunting invasive pythons in Florida. Unlike the alligator hunters in Louisiana, Bill operated in a different kind of environment, one filled with thick brush, hidden water, and dangerous wildlife. Before appearing on television, he had already built a life outdoors. He spent years as a firefighter and later turned his focus toward wildlife and guiding hunts. That background gave him a steady mindset and a strong understanding of risk, which showed in the way he approached every job. He wasn't loud or over the top. He was focused, practical, and deeply experienced. Bill carried out python hunting activities because he wanted to stop a dangerous python infestation that was spreading through the Everglades. The snakes that invaded the region had entered from outside, and they began to disrupt the ecological system of the environment. Bill worked with teams that tracked and removed them, often using advanced tools like thermal scanners and trained dogs. He established better hunting methods, which eventually made his work popular because people recognized his precise hunting method. His main goal was to do his job without attracting attention to himself. His dedication to his work and its effects on the environment established a direct connection with his audience and his colleagues. Everybody who witnessed his work achieved this because he developed a mentality that earned him the respect of his colleagues. His accident occurred 2 months after he received his driver's license. Bill lost control of his all-terrain vehicle while he drove on familiar paths. The crash occurred so rapidly that it created a situation that left no possibility of escaping the danger. He crashed into a tree, which resulted in him sustaining multiple serious wounds. Emergency medical workers brought him to the nearest hospital after they received his emergency call. But he died despite their attempts to save him. Accident investigators identified 2 main factors that caused the crash that occurred in that location. Accidents can occur within a moment for a person who has better risk awareness than average. The people who knew him and the people who understood his work experienced strong effects from his death. Bill was more than just another television personality because he dedicated his life to protecting people through his work as a firefighter and his subsequent wildland firefighting career. The invasive species control work he performed demonstrated to his audience that he had deeper intentions than what they saw on television. The experience of losing him felt like an unexpected and unjust event because he continued to work and make contributions to his field. The story of his life shows that people who dedicate their lives to danger management will never achieve total safety. R.J. and J. Paul Molinari. R.J. and J. Paul Molinari were one of the most skilled father-son teams on Swamp People. From the moment they appeared, it was clear they weren't just there for show. R.J. brought years of experience and strength, while J. Paul added speed, energy, and sharp instincts. Together, they worked like a unit that didn't need much talking. They knew their roles and trusted each other completely. Their background in arm wrestling and boxing showed in the way they handled tough situations. When things got intense, they didn't panic. They stayed locked in and got the job done. Their style on the water made them stand out. They were fast, efficient, and focused on results. While other teams relied on routine, the Molinares often pushed harder, taking risks to secure bigger catches. Fans respected them for that. They weren't trying to entertain. They were trying to win the season. Over time, they built a reputation as one of the strongest crews on the show. But like many stories connected to the series, what happened off the water would eventually change how people saw them. RJ and J. Paul faced arrest after their involvement in a serious incident that occurred in 2013. The situation began earlier in the day with a verbal dispute involving another man. The same person who had been confronted at the convenience store was confronted again later in the day. The situation escalated when both parties began fighting each other. The reports described how the man received visible injuries after someone attacked him with a bottle. The surveillance footage established that Molinares had tracked him to the site before the fight began. Authorities stepped in, and both men were charged with aggravated battery. The case carried the possibility of heavy penalties, which included both prison time and large fines. Their court appearance ended with a denial of all charges and an assertion that additional facts needed to be revealed. Their lawyers maintained that they had not started the fight because the other party had incorrectly interpreted what had occurred. The defense failed to protect their public reputation, which suffered from the court case. Years later, more trouble followed when J. Paul served time related to court issues tied to financial obligations. The swamp incident became a permanent part of their story, even though they progressed by running their business operations. The strongest teams showed fans how quickly everything changed when off-the-water activities became their main focus. Hold on to that feeling, because what comes next stands out in a whole new way. Troy Landry. If you watched Swamp People, you already know Troy Landry. He became the face of the show almost from the beginning, known for his loud calls, fast pace, and ability to handle pressure without slowing down. Growing up in Louisiana, Troy learned about the swamp long before cameras followed him. Hunting alligators wasn't something he picked up later in life. It was part of how he was raised. On the show, he stood out not just because of his skill, but because of his energy. He pushed hard every season, chasing tags and moving from one spot to another to stay ahead. Troy didn't work alone. His sons, especially Chase, became a big part of his story. They created one of their most powerful water teams through their teamwork. Their productivity showed through their quick execution of tasks, which they completed with total focus. Troy led through his past work, but he demanded that his team accomplish their tasks. The way he approached work enabled him to maintain his performance throughout all his professional years. Other teams experienced problems or required adjustments, but Troy maintained his normal performance level. His dedication to work proved his respectability as a top hunter throughout his time on the show. Troy has experienced difficulties during his life because not everything has gone perfectly for him. Over the years, there have been moments that brought attention outside of the hunts. He faced minor legal issues and health concerns, which raised doubts about his ability to maintain his work performance. The show-related situations that affected him created non-critical challenges because they showed that everyone experiences pressure and health decline over time. The work Troy performs takes an enduring toll, which leads to permanent work-related consequences. The primary distinction of Troy from others lies in his persistent presence at all times. He maintained his active work as he continued to participate in the production despite encountering multiple challenges. Troy maintained his position as a leader throughout all challenges because he kept his foundation of support. The contrast between his story and the stories of other series participants shows his unique path. He operates as a stable force at a location that experiences frequent breakdowns. The show required him to manage dangerous situations and unpredictable changes. Junior Edwards. Junior Edwards was one of the most recognized figures on Swamp People, known for his strong personality and old-school approach to hunting. From the early seasons, he stood out as someone who didn't try to impress anyone. He spoke his mind, worked hard, and expected the same from the people around him. Alongside his family, especially his son Willie, he built a reputation as a serious and focused hunter. He wasn't loud for attention. He was direct, because that's how he lived. Viewers saw him as tough, experienced, and someone who understood the swamp better than most. His style on the water matched his personality. Junior didn't waste time with small talk or hesitation. When it came to hunting, he relied on instinct and years of experience. He knew where to go, when to move, and how to handle pressure when things got difficult. That confidence made him one of the more respected hunters on the show. But at the same time, that same strong personality could also lead to tension. He wasn't someone who backed down easily, and that trait followed him both on and off the water. The reports described an incident that involved violence and resulted in his detention. The situation began with an altercation that escalated until it reached a point where serious charges were filed against the parties involved. The evidence that connects to the case established that two people engaged in a physical fight, which resulted in one person getting hurt. The case proceeded to trial, which resulted in Junior receiving a sentence that included prison time for his role in the incident. The viewers who had watched his television shows about family and hunting activities now saw him in an entirely different way. Junior spent time away from public view after he resolved his legal matters. The actor reduced his participation in the series while he took on different responsibilities within the show. The fans could see the change because it became obvious to them. The main actor of the early episodes left the show, which created a vacancy that proved difficult to fill. The audience learned from his experiences that people who live outside the swamp face different life paths than what they think will happen. Everything that followed his public appearance began to transform into evidence that everything he did outside the shooting area would eventually change his entire career.
Tyler Edwards.
Tyler Edwards came into Swamp People as part of the Edwards family, a group already known for their strong presence on the show. Being connected to that name meant expectations were high from the start. He grew up in the same environment, learning how to handle the swamp, the boats, and the pressure that came with the job. On screen, Tyler showed that he could keep up. He understood the work and didn't shy away from it. For viewers, he represented the next generation, someone who could carry on the same way of life that had been built over the years. Tyler gained experience through his work with his relatives, who taught him their skills. He required help from others. Experienced workers who had already completed their tasks gave him assistance. His confidence increased because he was able to deal with all the challenges that arose during his time on the water. He entered the room with a clear goal, which he maintained until he achieved his mission. Although he had less screen time than other actors, he still managed to create an impact. He appeared to possess the necessary skills to create a stable foundation that would support his progress throughout the competition. The situation outside of that location became unmanageable because people lost control over their actions. Tyler later became involved in legal trouble that brought unwanted attention. The media started to report on his arrests, which included charges for driving under the influence and other criminal offenses. The incidents that occurred outside of the swamp and television work showed different aspects of his character. The first incident created a new challenge, which increased difficulties while maintaining the public image that audiences had established. The initial problems, which occurred in separate instances, developed into a recurring issue that became impossible to overlook. The show's connection to him continued to weaken as time progressed. The focus shifted away from his role, and his presence faded compared to earlier seasons. The fans learned about potential alternate outcomes that could have changed the entire situation. Tyler's story shows a common pattern that actors experience, where their real-life activities become as crucial as their performances in films. The situation demonstrates how fast things can transform when people make choices about their activities outside the water, which leads to actual outcomes that impact their career trajectory and future development. Chase Landry. Chase Landry grew up in the middle of the swamp, learning the trade from one of the most well-known hunters on the show, his father, Troy. From a young age, he was already around boats, gators, and the kind of work most people would avoid. Early mornings, long hours, and constant risk were normal to him. When he appeared on Swamp People, he didn't come in as a beginner. He already knew the pace, the risks, and what it took to survive a full season. On screen, Chase was known for being aggressive, fast, and not afraid to take control when things got tense. He brought energy that stood out, especially during high-pressure hunts where quick decisions mattered, and hesitation could cost everything. Working alongside his family, Chase became part of one of the strongest teams on the show. The Landry name carried weight, and he played a role in keeping that reputation intact. He handled catches with confidence, stayed focused under pressure, and wasn't the type to second-guess himself in critical moments. Viewers saw him as someone who could carry on the legacy, someone with both the skill and mindset needed for the job. But while everything looked solid on the surface, not all of his decisions outside of hunting followed that same level of control. And that's where things slowly began to shift. The water incident, which occurred in 2016, led to Chase experiencing severe legal difficulties. He shot his rifle at a passing shrimp boat while he was out during gator season. He reported that his smaller boat faced danger because the boat operated too close to his position. The witnesses present at the location of the incident reported different details about what happened. The shot hit an area of the shrimp boat, which transformed a dangerous situation into a police investigation. Chase confessed to police that he fired the weapon when they interviewed him. Authorities charged him with illegal discharge of a firearm, which is a felony offense that carries severe penalties. The situation developed into a new phase when his court date arrived in 2017. Chase received an arrest warrant after he failed to appear in court on his scheduled 2017 date. The decision brought additional stress to the already critical situation, while it generated public interest in his behavior. The show established his image, but he experienced a radical change. Chase resumed his work with his family after he finished participating in the show. His story demonstrates the rapid nature of life changes. One momentary decision leads to lasting consequences that extend into unexpected areas. Stay with me, because the last name brings a whole different kind of story. Randy Edwards. Randy Edwards was one of the familiar faces from the Edwards family, a group that helped define the early seasons of Swamp People. He grew up around the swamp, learning how to hunt and survive from a young age, long before cameras ever showed up. When the show started in 2010, Randy appeared alongside his father, Junior, his mother, Teresa, and his brother, Willie. What made their family stand out wasn't just their skill, but how real they felt. There was no acting, no trying to impress. They worked hard, spoke plainly, and handled gator season like it was just another part of life. Viewers connected with that right away, and Randy became someone people recognized as steady, focused, and dependable. Randy maintained his performance level through 6 seasons. His work presence remained constant, although he did not show extreme behavior through loudness or theatricality. He moved through the water with determination. He understood the necessary tasks and immediately began executing them without delaying for discussion. He dedicated his life to his family duties outside of his professional life. His life mission was to provide for his wife and children, who depended on him. The way he balanced dangerous swamp life with his peaceful home existence made his story easy for people to understand. The audience perceived him as a hunter who tried to create a secure existence in an area where everything remained uncertain. The month of September 2018 saw everything transform in an instant. Randy lost control of his vehicle while he drove through Louisiana after midnight on a highway. His truck crashed into a utility pole after driving off the road, and then it turned over. The crash resulted in critical injuries to his body. He died at the accident scene after being thrown from the vehicle. He passed away at 35 years of age. The reports showed that impairment probably contributed to the accident, while the investigators confirmed that he drove without wearing a seatbelt. The process of understanding the situation became more difficult because that information transformed a situation that could have been survived into an unchangeable outcome. The family and fans experienced deep emotional pain from the news. The Edwards family had established their presence since the start, and their story made people feel close to them. The situation affected him on a personal level. Randy existed as more than a character who appeared on the program. The audience had seen his family develop throughout the series. His passing created an unfilled void that affected both his on-screen presence and his relationships with those who knew him best. The men who work in dangerous conditions face hidden threats that extend beyond their work in the swamp. The world experiences its greatest changes during the most unexpected times. Not every story from swamp people ends in the swamp. Some ended suddenly. Others took a turn no one saw coming. It just shows that what happens off-camera can be just as intense as anything we see on screen. If any of these stories surprised you, drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more. And if you want to keep watching, click on the next video you see on your screen.